Playing video games on the job again, huh?
Yeah, just a sec. I have to beat this boss.
Oh.
Alright, I'm back.
Oh.
But why do we call it a boss fight anyway?
In most games you come to a point where your skill is being tested. You've waded through those easy enemies only to make it to a tougher, bigger opponent. A boss battle follows. Why do we call this bigger, tougher opponent a boss? After all, a boss is a person in charge of an employee or organization. Do video games conform to this idea? The very first game to ever use a boss is credited to be D&D, based on the tabletop role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons. The goal in this game is to reach the lowest level of a dungeon and retrieve an orb that is guarded by a foe named the Golden Dragon. But a Golden Dragon doesn't really sound like a person in charge of an organization. Why not call it a challenge or a fiend? A super baddie? We can establish that the word boss has been in use as early as 1986. In the original US manual of the NES game Metroid, mini-boss is used as a term to describe the monstrous Ridley. So Nintendo has at least been using the term as early as this time. Let's dig a little deeper. A scan of the 1983 December issue of Joystick magazine is falsely considered as the earliest source that uses the word boss in video games. A letter sent by an arcade player is titled "Get Back at the Boss" and talks of the enemy spaceship, Boss Gallagher. This is where things get interesting. In the 1988 Gallagher manual for the NES, the word Boss Gallagher frequently pops up and refers to the same ships as from the 1983 letter. But that's not how Namco, the developer of the game, refers to those ships. In a 1981 arcade game operating manual of Gallagher, we discover that Boss Gallaghers are referred to as command ships. Command ships! That makes so much more sense! You know what? Let's go crazy and let's dig even deeper.
Dig a little deeper?
On a Japanese Wikipedia page, Space Panic is mentioned to be the first game that uses enemies called bosses. Now, my Japanese is practically non-existent. And even with Google Translate on my side, the lack of any source makes this article less convincing. Except that there is a source. A Space Panic arcade operating manual from December 1980 mentions that we, the player, must dig to trap enemies, of which the tougher ones are called bosses. This may very well be the first recorded use of the word boss related to video games. But how did it get there? Why, of all words, did they choose that one? Hang on to your hat, kids. We're going to have to dig even deeper. The Space Panic operating manual reveals one last clue in the form of a third kind of enemy that you can encounter, the Don. Now, a Don and a boss can both be figures of power and influence, but whereas a Don is more likely to be associated with the mafia, a boss can still be the leader of a legitimate business. Except that's not the case in Japanese. In his book English Loanwords in Japanese, Akira Miura explains that bossu can mean the following. A person who has gained control of his organization, especially political or criminal, with coercion. It therefore usually carries a derogatory connotation. In Japanese in 1979, a boss was someone who got power by coercion and threats. This really puts things into perspective. The Japanese word bossu would simply be translated into boss, but its negative connotation would be lost in translation. This could really be the reason then why we say boss in video games.
Man, who ordered the 100 big bosses?
One final fun fact. Bruce Lee often came up during my boss quest. Why? Well, maybe because in 1972 he fought gangsters in his first major film, entitled The Big Boss. For now, I say thank you, and remember, mind your language. This may very well be the very first recorded use. I couldn't think of the word use.